Hello, hello. How's it going, Wolfpack? This is Fox Trevize here for our. Well, if you're on D Live, it's day 4. If you're on YouTube, it's day 10. But if you're keeping track, it's actually day 8 of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and day 37 of us having problems with our titles. We left off yesterday with the very, very long show because of what happened yesterday, which was Kyle Rittenhouse took the stand. No one was quite sure if that was going to happen, though it was predicted it would happen. It was alluded to earlier in the trial. And then Kyle ended up taking the stand yesterday, and that was highly fascinating. Some of the biggest moments from that would be Mr. Lawyer Sir Binger getting yelled at quite loudly by the judge. As Tucker Carlson put it last night, you could watch court cases on TV for 10 years straight and never see something like what you saw in court yesterday. And I would probably have to agree with that. That was definitely a unique instance. The court, it remains unseen as to whether or not the judge will accept the motion that Kyle's defense put forward yesterday. As you may remember, Kyle's defense attorneys put forward the motion for a mistrial with prejudice, which means that if granted, all the charges are essentially dropped and the state is unable to retry Kyle on these charges and he is free to go. When we left off yesterday, there was a little bit left of Kyle's testimony because we started stream while Kyle was still testifying yesterday. So, as per usual, we will finish up yesterday's testimony with Kyle, which we're actually going to start off by watching, just kind of watching about an 8-minute clip of the most interesting part of Kyle's testimony. Then we'll comment on it. This will be a rather short show. In fact, the longest part of it is probably going to be watching watching Kyle himself give his testimony and then me commenting on it. But today was not super eventful, though. Today did end with a rather fascinating conversation about how image expansion works in a computer, and whether or not when you zoom in on an image on your computer, where do those extra pixels come from? There was a rather interesting conversation about that pretty much all day. And as you can see here on the screen, I didn't realize this, but if you zoom in with forensic imaging software, which I do have, it's called Streamlabs, you can actually take a picture of Prosecutor Binger, and if you zoom in on his nose, as I've shown here on screen, miraculously, you can actually see the word virgin. I don't know if it's a tattoo or a birthmark or a statement of fact. I'm just showing you the evidence. I don't have any interpretation of the evidence. I'm just presenting it to you, the jury. We'll get into all that, but why don't we start off with Kyle's testimony, where we left off yesterday. Let me see where we left off yesterday. When we left off yesterday, the state was playing a bit of drone footage. So as I said, we found out recently, and it was admitted into evidence. Yes, triumvirate, flawless forensic work. As we heard yesterday, where I left off at was there was this new drone footage, and this was a commercial drone, like something you could go to Walmart and buy. It was a quadcopter with a camera on it that links to your iPhone. It was that kind of a drone, not something that's like a Predator drone flying over Afghanistan or something like that. This is not the same footage that the FBI took, and again, the FBI infrared overhead view, that was from a fixed wing aircraft that had people inside of it. It wasn't a drone either, though the terminology for where did these two aerial images come from has been getting a little bit confused. So I'm just trying to make that clear that the footage that I'm talking about is from the quadcopter with a camera that somebody had on the street there, not the FBI footage. So this quadcopter footage was relatively new, and it got brought in late in the trial, which that happens sometimes. And I had commented earlier, it was interesting that this quadcopter was somehow able to take off 20 seconds prior to the shooting and then 10 seconds prior to the shooting, have perfectly in frame the exact location where it was going to happen. Conspiracy, I don't know. It was just a coincidence, an odd coincidence. So there was an objection to this footage because it was previously testified that this footage now it was alleged. I don't see it. A lot of people don't see it. That in this footage, you can see Kyle raise his rifle and point it at Rosenbaum prior to Rosenbaum, or pointed at somebody, I guess, prior to Rosenbaum chasing him. And what the state is trying to prove is that if Kyle pointed his rifle at somebody before Rosenbaum chased him, then that potentially would give Rosenbaum a reason to chase down Kyle, thus making it Kyle who initiated the conflict. And if Kyle initiated the conflict, if the state can prove that Kyle initiated conflict, then Kyle doesn't get to use self-defense and he is guilty of murder. However, the state has to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Kyle initiated conflict. As will be explained later in this episode here, the extremely blown up image of a very blurry Kyle is probably not beyond a reasonable doubt. However, it is something that is at odds. So there's an objection from Kyle's defense. They would rather that this video, this video was previously played at its original resolution. It was testified by Detective Antomarini, who, if you aren't aware of Antomarini's family connections at this point, I don't know if I want to go all the way back into that. But Detective Antomarini he testified on the stand that using pinch zoom on his iPhone, he was able to see Kyle raise his rifle and point it at people. Obviously, you can't do pinch zoom on a TV. Mr. Binger, at this point, attempted to plug his iPad into the TV display, and there was an objection that this is not how things regularly go. The display on the TV is connected to a computer, and only evidence that is properly submitted is loaded onto that computer and then shown on the TV screen to the jury. So Mr. Binger wanting to plug his iPad in so that he could do a pinch zoom, that was irregular, so to speak. Let's see here. So what is also of interest is that previously Detective Antomarini, when testifying that he could only see this via a pinch zoom on his iPad, the Kyle's defense asked him, so Kyle raising his rifle and pointing it at people, you're telling us that is unobservable in the original video? And Detective Antomarini says yes, which is interesting that, he's testifying that he can see something unobservable. That's, I guess if that's what he wants to go with. Let's see here. The yesterday where we left where the day ended was this objection, and no, it's not exactly where the day ended. It's where I left off at. There was an objection, and basically Kyle's defense was saying, well, we don't know. Let me back up here. Because Mr. Binger was not allowed to plug his iPad in, Mr. Binger wanted to use a... Let me back up again. I'm getting confused here. There we go. Okay, so Mr. Binger wanted to plug his iPad in. The defense said, no, you can't do that. First off, that's not how you submit evidence. Also, we don't know what method the iPad pinch zoom uses to blow up the image. Obviously, it's got to add pixels to the image if it's expanding it, and we don't know what method Apple uses to expand images. Mr. Binger said, well, everybody in the country, everybody's smartphones, everybody's very familiar with pinch zoom on a picture. And that may be, but the defense's point was it doesn't matter if everyone's familiar with it. If you want to have this as evidence, you need to be able to explain where those extra pixels are coming from. And later today, Kyle's defense attorney will have a much more concise way of phrasing it, in that when you pinch zoom on something like a family photo, and let's say the algorithm's adding in extra pixels and colors and maybe different patterns that weren't necessarily in the original image, that's not a big deal on a family photo. When you're talking about a very small number of pixels, and that makes the difference in a murder trial, all of a sudden it becomes extremely important what exactly that iPad's doing when you pinch zoom. And I think that's the perfect way of explaining it. I think Binger's correct that everybody in the country is familiar with pinch zoom. It's a very common activity. However, it's not a common activity where your entire life is dependent on what is happening when you pinch zoom your phone. That's a really high burden, and I think you better be real goddamn sure what's going on when you pinch zoom if your life is on the line. Again, that's a big difference from pinch zooming on a picture of your dog and seeing how cute it is, or making a funny zoom in on just his eye because he's got googly eyes or something like that. That's not as life and death as what Kyle's facing right now. And I certainly think that it is a worthwhile discussion to be had as to what is going on when you pinch zoom an image like that. Let's see here. So the defense makes this, or the state makes this whataboutism argument that the state has, or that the Kyle's defense has brought in images that were expanded. And the judge says, well, if you didn't object to him then I'm not going to object to him for you. You could have possibly, and maybe the judge would have made a ruling on it, but the state chose not to object to the images then. And just because the state chose not to object to images previously doesn't preclude Kyle's defense from objecting to images now. So that's where we left off with on that. They took a break for a little while, and then they came back. This would have been while I was streaming yesterday. At this point yesterday, Kyle would have been on the stand for about 6 hours. Kyle would go on to be on the stand for about 7.5 hours. It was a long day for Kyle. All right, so Kyle comes back and resumes his cross-examination with the state, and basically this whole kerfuffle with the image that was put on pause, and it was addressed during today's part of the trial. But as we continue on with yesterday's end of the day, we'll come back to that part in a little bit. All right, let's watch about 8 minutes worth of Kyle's testimony. I'm going to play it at 1.25 speed just to try and get it through here a little bit quicker. But this was a pretty good bit of testimony here. We'll watch and I'll let you guys judge.
Go ahead. All right, pause it. Did you slow down?
Did I?
Yeah.
I turned around, and I may have slowed down a little bit.
It looks like you slowed down before you even turned around.
Yes.
You characterized Mr. Rosenbaum as advancing on you, speeding up towards you, but you actually slowed down, didn't you?
Because of the people around the cars, yes.
But after the shooting, you run around those cars and head back towards the direction you originally wanted to go to, right?
Yes.
So those people didn't stop that, did they?
They weren't there after I shot Mr. Rosenbaum.
They scattered after you fired your gun 4 times, didn't they?
Yes, they weren't there anymore.
And you've heard Dr. Kelly's testimony that the first gunshot from you to Mr. Rosenbaum caused Mr. Rosenbaum to start falling to the ground. Did you hear that testimony?
I did.
And then you continued to fire 3 more shots into him after that, didn't you?
I continued to fire until he was no longer a threat to me.
When he's falling to the ground in front of you, he's no longer a threat to you. His pelvis is broken, right?
I don't know.
But he's fallen to the ground, isn't he?
This is a very fascinating line of reasoning here. Well, after the first shot, his pelvis was broken. Excuse me, Kyle does not have x-ray eyes to see Rosenbaum's pelvis is shattered. That's not on Kyle to know whether or not Rosenbaum's pelvis is shattered. Kyle's not a doctor. He doesn't, even if he saw an x-ray If he was somehow able to freeze frame time, take an x-ray of Mr. Rosenbaum and see that his pelvis was shattered, Kyle's not a doctor. He's not qualified to determine whether or not the pelvis is indeed shattered. This is totally irrelevant. Kyle's response of, I kept shooting until he was no longer a threat, is perfect. Kyle will continue to have perfect responses. Well, most of them will be perfect. Some of them, they could be better. But this is a perfect response in a self-defense shooting. Is you didn't shoot to kill. You didn't shoot because you wanted to harm them. You shot to eliminate a threat. You shot until it was no longer a threat. That is exactly the correct part of the testimony here. Also, and I think Binger's going to go back into it, but you saw at the beginning there, Binger said, well, you said Rosenbaum was gaining ground on you, but you slowed down, didn't you? So I guess it's now your fault. If you're being chased and you slow down, it's your fault for slowing down that the other person's gaining ground on you. This is the old the schoolyard argument after everybody learns about relativity in their 6th grade science classes. Oh, I didn't punch anybody. Their face ran into my fist. It's all relative, right? So it's not that Rosenbaum was chasing Kyle. It's that Kyle, I guess, was relative to Rosenbaum running backwards. Relative to Rosenbaum wasn't moving anywhere. It's relativity, guys. Einstein proved it. Totally ridiculous. We'll let Mr. Binger continue here.
I did.
And then you continued to fire 3 more shots into him after that, didn't you?
I continued to fire until he was no longer a threat to me.
When he's falling to the ground in front of you, he's no longer a threat to you. His pelvis is broken, right?
I don't know.
But he's fallen to the ground, isn't he?
I saw him lunging towards my gun, and I remember his hand on the barrel of my gun.
Because he was trying to push it out of the way so you wouldn't shoot him.
That is wild. That is absolutely wild. Kyle said Mr. Rosenbaum's hand was on his rifle, and the state just says that wasn't even a question. First off, that wasn't a question. The lawyers are not allowed to just make statements like that. They can only say things formed in a question. It's like Jeopardy. They are not allowed to make statements like that. And Kyle said, he had his hand on my rifle, and then Mr. Binger just responds, well, the reason why he had his hand on his rifle is because he was trying to push it out of the way so that you wouldn't shoot him. Really? Is that what we're going to go with here? That's why... Okay. You will also note here that in that statement, which is actually very interesting because since it wasn't a question and it was a direct statement by Prosecutor Binger, Binger in that statement has conceded whether or not Rosenbaum was touching the rifle. Binger just made a statement that said Rosenbaum was touching the rifle, and here's the alleged justification. Now, the justification for why Rosenbaum was touching the rifle, Mr. Binger doesn't know that. He wasn't in Rosenbaum's head. He wasn't even there. He has no idea why Rosenbaum was touching that rifle. The only thing we do know is Rosenbaum was touching the rifle. We can see it in video. We saw it with the autopsy testimony about the soot pattern on Rosenbaum's hand. And now Mr. Binger, Prosecutor Binger, has just conceded that yes, Rosenbaum was touching the rifle, but, well, it doesn't matter what the reasoning was. It really doesn't matter what the reasoning is because we don't know. There's nobody that can testify what the reasoning is. The only thing that we know for certain is Rosenbaum was touching the rifle. Rosenbaum was touching the rifle after chasing Kyle across a parking lot. People were concerned yesterday about whether or not it was a good idea for Kyle to take the stand. The general consensus is that it was not bad. There's a lot of places where Kyle could have done better. Certainly this part of the testimony does a lot better. There are some spots where he had some issues that I think that he might get hung up on, but I don't think it's going to be enough to sink or swim him. But generally speaking, it was thought that he did well. However, what's interesting here is normally when you're testifying in your own murder, you're a defendant in your own murder trial, you typically don't testify because this gives you an opportunity to really say a bunch of stuff that you probably don't want the jury to hear. And typically it's not done. Kyle testifying here is very rare. It might happen 1 in 10 cases like this. What's interesting, though, is it's not Kyle that says something by mistake. It's actually Binger who says something by mistake by accidentally conceding that, yes, Rosenbaum was indeed touching the rifle, when I believe it was in Binger's opening statement that Rosenbaum wasn't touching the rifle. And now we're at the end of the trial where even Binger's convinced. Binger's own witnesses and Kyle convinced Binger that his client was touching Kyle's rifle. That's wild. All right. Let's see here.
I continued to fire until he was no longer a threat to me.
When he's falling to the ground in front of you, he's no longer a threat to you. His pelvis is broken, right?
I don't know.
But he's fallen to the ground, isn't he?
I saw him lunging towards my gun, and I remember his hand on the barrel of my gun.
Because he was trying to push it out of the way so you wouldn't shoot him. What was the risk to you of death or great bodily harm at the moment you killed Joseph Rosenbaum?
If I would have let Mr. Rosenbaum take my firearm from me, he would have used it and killed me with it and probably killed more people if I would have let him get my gun.
That is the exactly correct answer. That is exactly the correct answer. Kyle's testimony here, not all of it, certain parts of this will be sliced up and used as training footage in self-defense classes. I have concealed carry insurance. Along with that comes a lot of, and what various concealed carry insurances do for you, and I highly recommend them, is if you're involved in a self-defense incident, they will provide you a lawyer. It's because self-defense lawyers are extremely expensive. Essentially, everybody paying into an insurance pool, you then are provided one for, well, not for free, but as a part of your insurance plan there. But along with that, they also give you, at least mine does, gives you kind of instructions. There's seminars and videos and a library of documentation that you can go through that explains, if you're involved in a self-defense trial, here's what you can expect, here's what you should do, here's what you should say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This video, this testimony that Kyle has will be used in those libraries in the future for sure. What he just said there was absolutely correct. And we'll rewind a little bit here and rewatch that because it's so important what he said, and it's important for you to remember that.
Out of the way so you wouldn't
shoot my gun, and I remember his hand on the barrel of my gun.
Because he was trying to push it out of the way so you wouldn't shoot him. What was the risk to you of death or great bodily harm at the moment you killed Joseph Rosenbaum?
If I would have let Mr. Rosenbaum take my firearm from me, he would have used it and killed me with it and probably killed more people if I would have let him get my gun.
Mr. Rosenbaum never said anything to you about taking your gun, did he?
He didn't say anything, but he tried to take my gun.
And whoever's got that gun is a threat to everyone else?
If he would have taken...
Okay, so two things of interest here. Immediately after Binger makes a statement, which he's not allowed to do, Binger makes a statement of what's in Rosenbaum's head when he touches Kyle's rifle. He said, the reason Rosenbaum touched your rifle is because he was trying to push it out of the way so he couldn't get shot. In like the next 10 seconds, Kyle says, I thought he was going to take it from me and shoot me. And then Binger says, you couldn't possibly know what's in Rosenbaum's head. Well, how does Mr. Binger know what's in Rosenbaum's head? But Binger is allowed to tell Kyle that. Binger is allowed to say that to Kyle, that you don't know what's in Rosenbaum's head. He's allowed to say that to the jury, but Kyle's not allowed to do the reverse. This Binger, he needs to be disbarred. This is why the lawyers are not allowed to make statements, because the lawyers are not allowed to be cross-examined, because they're not the ones that are supposed to be testifying. Yet Mr. Binger continuously makes statements during the questioning as though he's making testimony. We saw yesterday with the whole exploding bullets thing. Binger was up there just spouting off several sentences in a row, explaining his very incorrect notion of how ammo works, of how various ballistics types of bullets work, giving testimony. Yeah, he's not allowed to be cross-examined on that. If Binger is going to be continuously making statements like that, then Binger should go up on the stand and allow Kyle's lawyer to cross-examine him on his lack of knowledge on ballistics and his how does Mr. Binger know what the reasoning Mr. Rosenbaum had for touching Kyle's rifle? Does Binger know something the rest of us don't? Is Binger friends with Rosenbaum? How would he know? It's ridiculous. And Kyle will again repeat that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Rosenbaum grabbed his rifle, Rosenbaum would have shot and killed him and shot and killed other people. That's perfect response. Perfect response. Definitely.
The risk to you of death or great bodily harm at the moment you killed Joseph Rosenbaum.
If I would have let Mr. Rosenbaum take my firearm from me, he would have used it and killed me with it and probably killed more people if I would have let him get my gun.
Mr. Rosenbaum never said anything to you about taking your gun, did he?
He didn't say anything, but he tried to take my gun.
Actions speak louder than words. Anybody? Well, Mr. Binger never said he was going to take your gun. Yeah, but he was actively taking your gun. Like, I mean, come on now. Come on now. I'm sure that a lot of... I'm sure. You know, this case is somewhat related to the Jacob Blake incident in case, you know, not in specifics, but in you know, the timeline of continuity here. Do you think that Jacob Blake, when he was raping his baby mama repeatedly, do you think that he told her that he was going to rape her? Or do you think that he just went in and raped her? Typically, when people commit these crimes like this that they're alleging Kyle committed, typically they're not going to tell you and explain to you what they're about to do to you prior to them doing it. Also, what does it matter? Are you allowed to just do stuff? And as long as you didn't tell someone you were going to do it, whatever you do is okay? I mean, all right. Kyle never told Rosenbaum that he was going to shoot him. So how do we know that Kyle shot Rosenbaum? You don't know what Kyle did. He didn't say what he was going to do.
And whoever's got that gun is a threat to everyone else?
If he would have taken my gun, he would have used it against me.
Let's break that down. First of all,
that was a very dirty line of questioning. I don't know if that was the best response at the end. It was a continuous mantra response, which was fine. However, Binger was attempting to impeach the entire ideas of guns. We actually, very interesting. It was discovered today. It's been going around that I'm sure this was previously available knowledge, though it's become more in the public consciousness today. Mr. Binger ran for political office in Wisconsin on the Democrat Party ticket 18 months ago and lost. Mr. Binger is here in this courtroom today because even as a Democrat, he couldn't get elected in Wisconsin. I believe that Mr. Binger right now doesn't care if he gets disbarred. In fact, getting disbarred in this case, throwing everything he's got at it, the two ways for Binger to get out of this is that either he throws everything into it and it works, or it doesn't work and there's riots, but he tried his best, right? Or he tried his best to corrupt the system and do these very illegal maneuvers to try to get Kyle in jail. And either he succeeds or he doesn't. However, that builds up his street cred as a Democrat, as a progressive Democrat even. And then if Binger gets disbarred after this, well, that's even more street cred for being a progressive Democrat. I believe that Mr. Binger here, while he might want to claim that Kyle's TikTok bio of just trying to be famous, that is a statement of motive for Kyle to execute 4 people. That's what Mr. Binger's current case is. I don't think that that's true for Kyle. However, it makes you wonder, where would Mr. Binger get that kind of idea at? Is it possible that Mr. Binger is trying to prosecute Kyle in this manner right now because Mr. Binger is trying to get famous? Maybe he's trying to get more name recognition and street cred with the progressives for the next election cycle. I would be very curious to continue following, and I may add Mr. Binger's name to my list of flagged news terms, just to kind of keep him in the back burner. I would be unsurprised if Mr. Binger does not go for a higher office position in the next 2 years and uses this case as a justification as part of his credentials. This case is building Mr. Binger's credentials for political office. I think that also creates a kind of problem that maybe we need to address. A lot of our congressmen in the legislature, both state and federal, are lawyers, and they're also lawyers that continue having their license and that they're allowed to practice after they're out of office. I think that perhaps there's a problem between separating out the legislature from the judiciary. I think if you want to be a lawyer that runs for Congress, to run for a legislative or executive body, I think that you need to be disbarred. I don't think it's a problem that you want to run, but I think that you need to, I think the sacrifice of that is, if you want to be in the executive branch of either a state or federal government, you need to no longer be in the judicial. You need to be disbarred. If you want to be in the legislative, that's great. That's not a problem, but you need to be disbarred. We can't have this revolving door of the judiciary and the legislature and the executive because, well, as we see, it creates somewhat of a conflict of interest. What was happening 18 months ago? 18 months ago was right in the goddamn heart of the 2020 riots. And then Mr. Binger, right off the heels of losing, a couple months later, this incident in Kenosha happens, and Mr. Binger goes, well, I'm angry. I was a Democrat. I was trying to run the Democrat ticket. I was trying to run on the ticket that supports all of this burning. Maybe if I can put away the guy that tried to stop the burning, that tried to stop Antifa, tried to stop BLM, tried to stop the riots, maybe if I can put that guy away, maybe next time the election cycle comes around, they'll vote for me. That's a problem. That's a big goddamn problem. All right. Let's keep watching here.
At the moment you killed Joseph Rosenbaum.
If I would have let Mr. Rosenbaum take my firearm from me, he would have used it and killed me with it and probably killed more people if I would have let him get my gun.
Mr. Rosenbaum never said anything to you about taking your gun, did he?
He didn't say anything, but he tried to take my gun.
And whoever's got that gun is a threat to everyone else?
If he would have taken my gun, he would have used it against me.
Let's break that down. First of all, you had already prevented him from taking your gun by running away and doing that little dip and dodge that Mr. McGinnis talked about, right?
He was still coming after my gun.
But you could have kept running. You could have turned back around like you did, couldn't you?
No, I couldn't have.
You could have kept running prosecution? Is that how Mr. Binger would have talked to the 5-year-old that Rosenbaum raped? Maybe the 7-year-old that Rosenbaum raped. Or maybe Mr. Binger would have saved that for the 8, 13, and 12-year-old that Rosenbaum raped. Maybe if they'd only run a little faster, maybe it wouldn't have been their fault that Rosenbaum raped them. Also, this idea that Rosenbaum trying to take Kyle's rifle, that was over after Kyle did the dip and dodge. So there was as we've talked about several episodes ago at this point, Richie McGinnis and the video confirms testified that Rosenbaum had initially grabbed for Kyle's rifle. Kyle had parried it with the dip and dodge maneuver. Mr. Binger might regret saying that because I'm betting dip and dodge might get memed or repossessed by the right. I think that has potential to become a saying. We'll find out. It's only been 24 hours, but I certainly think that I would not mind having a T-shirt that says "The Dip and Dodge," with maybe a picture of Kyle. So we've already heard this testimony, right? That Rosenbaum grabbed for the rifle once. Kyle did a maneuver to avoid Rosenbaum's hand coming in contact with the rifle. We've seen that on video. And now Mr. Binger is saying, well, the threat of Rosenbaum taking your rifle was over. Well, no, it wasn't. First off, that's not how events work. Events, I don't know if Mr. Binger is aware of this, but sometimes an event can be an ongoing thing, an ongoing affair of sorts. So I don't necessarily know that 0.05 seconds after Rosenbaum misses Kyle's rifle for the second time, I don't think that necessarily means the threat is over. Why don't I think that means the threat is over? Well, because Mr. Binger has just conceded that Rosenbaum's hand was on Kyle's rifle a second time, a second attempt to grab Kyle's rifle when Kyle shot him. Mr. Binger's already conceded that. And the evidence supports that. So this idea that it was over, that Rosenbaum was no longer grabbing for Kyle's rifle. He had transitioned from grabbing Kyle's rifle to pushing it out of the way, I guess. Okay. I really do wonder what it is the jury's thinking here. I will be highly fascinated to hear their side of the story when this is all over, if any of them do wish to speak. Either way, whichever way the verdict ends up going, I'll be highly curious to see how Mr. Binger's presentation here played with them, because I can't see normal people, perhaps Twitter leftists, right? And in this space, a lot of you guys are probably politically active, or to a certain extent, or at least you're following certain current events. If you are on Twitter or aware of Twitter things, as we know, Twitter's not real life and very, very lefty. It's also very, very extremist. And so I see what the Twitter lefties are saying about this, and I see them just ideologically rigid, right? I don't really know what it is that an average, uninitiated person might be thinking about this. I have to imagine that this isn't compelling testimony. Clearly, this isn't a compelling argumentation from the state prosecutor. None of this really has to do with politics. It just has to do with interpreting being chased by a person. And I have to imagine that unless you're an ideological leftist, that this line of argumentation that, well, he was done pulling your rifle, he was just pushing it out of the way, that's why he ran up to you and yelled, "Fuck you." I just don't see how that's compelling. And I would be very interested to see from the jurors, hear from them, again, regardless of what the verdict is. I'd be very interested to hear from their perspective, how did this play? What were they thinking at this moment? What were they thinking about Binger's aggressive attitude? What were they thinking about this line of questioning? Was it compelling? Did it sway some of them when they went into deliberation? Was this even discussed, or was it just immediately repulsive to them? One of the operating theories right now is that the whole point of Kyle testifying was to allow Binger to do this berating of him, to be aggressive, to ask these ridiculous lines of questioning, so that the jury could see how ridiculous Binger was, and thus be more empathetic towards Kyle. Binger also really showing his cards here. If he had a more compelling case, then he would be presenting it right now. But Binger's case at the moment is, well, if you'd kept running, Rosenbaum wouldn't have caught you. If you'd let him take your rifle, then you wouldn't have had to shoot him. The only reason why he was even trying to take your rifle was so that you wouldn't shoot him. Who knows why he yelled "fuck you"? You don't know what's in his head. If there was a stronger case, I believe that it would be being presented at this moment, and it's just not. And I think that's an objective point of view. But like I said, I would love to see from a completely politically uninitiated person. Most of the people that are on the jury, as per my previous discussions about how the jury was selected, I would be curious as to how this is playing with them, because I don't see how a rational person is compelled by Mr. Binger's arguments here. Let's keep watching.
You have
My gun.
and whoever's got that gun is a threat to everyone else?
If he would have taken my gun, he would have used it against me.
Let's break that down. First of all, you had already prevented him from taking your gun by running away and doing that little dip and dodge that Mr. McGinnis talked about, right?
He was still coming after my gun.
But you could have kept running. You could
No,
have turned back around like you did, couldn't you?
No, I couldn't have.
You have the gun strapped to your body at this moment, correct?
Yes.
The strap is designed to keep that on your body so it doesn't come off, correct?
To help retain it, yes.
And you have both hands on the gun, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Rosenbaum has never said anything at all about wanting your gun. You never heard him say anything about that, correct?
I haven't.
You never said anything. He never said anything to you about using that gun at all, correct?
I don't know what Mr. Rosenbaum was thinking when he tried to grab my gun.
You just assumed that he was going to use it, that he was going to try and take it from you, first of all, and then you assumed he was going to try and use it on you.
If I would have let Mr. Rosenbaum get my gun, he would have killed me.
But you had already pointed your gun at him.
Yes, because he was chasing me.
Did you want him to think that you were going to shoot him?
No, I never wanted to shoot Mr. Rosenbaum.
Why'd you point it at him if you didn't have any intention of shooting?
He was chasing me. I was alone. He threatened to kill me earlier in that night. I didn't want to have to shoot him.
But you understand how dangerous it is to point a gun at someone, don't you?
I pointed at him because he kept running at me, and I didn't.
I'll remind you that yesterday, well, 2 days ago for us, the day before this testimony, Mr. Binger and Kyle's lawyers were pointing Kyle's unloaded rifle at each other all day during demonstrations. A lot of people had a lot of issue with that. I had a lot of issue about that. We previously covered that, but I just think it's funny that they were doing that. They were pointing rifles at each other, and Mr. Binger was pointing rifles at people in court. And then now Mr. Binger's asking Kyle, don't you think it's dangerous to point a rifle at people? Well, you were doing it. Kyle could have very easily just said, well, you were doing it in a testimony yesterday, so I don't know.
Want to shoot Mr. Rosenbaum.
Why'd you point it at him if you didn't have any intention of shooting?
He was chasing me. I was alone. He threatened to kill me earlier in that night. I didn't want to have to shoot him.
But you understand how dangerous it is to point a gun at someone, don't you?
I pointed at him because he kept running at me, and I didn't want him to chase me.
But you understand how dangerous that is, don't you?
I pointed at him because he was chasing me.
I'll ask the question a third time, Mr. Rittenhouse. You understand...
Don't comment. Just ask your question.
You understand how dangerous it is to point a gun at someone, correct?
People are asking, why isn't Kyle's lawyers objecting in chat here? And like I said, the theory by and I'm trying my best to not bring in too much outside analysis. This whole series of episodes here is more about what's going on in the trial. There's plenty of other people doing content and commentary on stuff outside the trial, but just a little bit here. From my understanding, some of the analysis has been that because Mr. Binger's line of questioning is so ridiculous that it is of benefit to the defense for the jury to see Mr. Binger badgering Kyle in this manner, and that perhaps that's why they're not objecting. I don't know that for sure, and I don't think any of the commentators necessarily know that for sure. However, it's been noted that this is a technique, or it's a technique that can be used and has been used. Whether or not that's what they're attempting to do right now, I don't know. However, Kyle's lawyers have been very willing to object to things throughout the trial. So I think that if they had really wanted to object to some of these things, they probably would have. There's probably a reason why they deliberately chose not to object to them, even though they could have. In fact, you're actually seeing Kyle's lawyers holding back, and the judge has hopped in here a few times to say something instead of Kyle's lawyers because of how ridiculous Binger's being. If Binger being so ridiculous that the judge is jumping in before Kyle's defense is, that seems to me to be pretty obvious that there's intention behind Kyle's lawyers not objecting, that they want Mr. Binger to look like an idiot, to look like a raving madman, to show the jury that he has no case against Kyle. I think that seems to hold up, even though it is difficult to watch him going at Kyle like this, and it is absolutely wrong. It is totally a miscarriage of justice for anybody to have to defend for Kyle to have to defend what he did that night. What he did that night is self-evidently defended. He doesn't require additional defense of it in the manner that Mr. Binger is suggesting here.
Correct. It's to point a gun at someone, don't you?
I pointed at him because he kept running at me, and I didn't want him to chase me.
But you understand how dangerous that is, don't you?
I pointed at him because he was chasing me.
I'll ask the question a third time, Mr. Rittenhouse. You understand...
Don't comment. Just ask your question.
You understand how dangerous it is to point a gun at someone, correct?
Yes.
You understand that puts someone else in fear that they're about to be killed, right?
He was chasing me.
You understand that when you point your AR-15 at someone else, that may make them feel like they are about to be killed by you, correct?
Mr. Rosenbaum was chasing me. He said he was going to kill me if he got me alone. I was alone. I was running from him. I pointed at him, and it didn't stop him from continuing to chase me.
Did you hear my question?
Yes.
Yet you chose not to answer it.
Objection, Your Honor. He answered. He just didn't like the answer.
My question is, you understand that when you point your AR-15 at someone, it may make them feel like you're going to kill them, correct?
Calls for speculation. Relevant.
He asked if it would affect someone that way so as to perhaps deter the person.
I would imagine that Mr. Rosenbaum saying earlier in the night twice that he was going to kill Kyle in various horrific ways, I would imagine that makes Kyle think that Mr. Rosenbaum is going to kill him, as Kyle's testifying that he does. So I guess, I don't know. I mean, I guess if two people make each other feel like they're going to die, who's got the right of way there? Well, I would say that the person who told you first that they're going to kill you, I would say that they're probably the one that's the aggressor. If at some point the person they said they're going to kill, if that person turns around and suddenly makes the aggressor feel like they're going to be killed, well, that's what self-defense is. That's what self-defense. This is something that I think is known and understood, but not said as bluntly as I'm about to say it. Self-defense is a violent act. Self-defense is violence. Self-defense is aggression. Now, violence and aggression, they've got in the Nancy boy culture that we have, sunshine, rainbows, flower power culture that we have, violence and aggression have been connotated as negative. However, violence and aggression are merely tools to be wielded. You can use a hammer to build a house. You can use a hammer to bash your loved one's skulls in. That it's just a tool. Violence and aggression is the same thing. You can use violence and aggression to defend your country, to defend your community, to defend your life. Or you can use it to commit crimes and make other people miserable. Violence and aggression in itself are not inherently good or bad. And self-defense is an inherently violent and aggressive act. But unfortunately, because of the current culture, society, the degradation in our language, that information cannot be stated as bluntly as I just did. Unfortunately. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps it could be stated that bluntly. Perhaps that's something that Kyle should have said, or Kyle's lawyer should have said, maybe to that extent. But that is what Kyle is struggling to say in a nice way. And you can't say what I just said in a nice way. You can't explain the philosophy of violence and aggression and self-defense. Not from the witness stand. And Kyle shouldn't have to explain that, but being that he's in this position, he's now being forced to try to say what I just said, but with, I guess, Newspeak Dictionary number 14 language. We've degraded the language, and we've degraded the mental fortitude of the culture that it's impossible to explain what I just said. It's impossible to explain that delineation between violence and aggression and its relationship to good, evil, and self-defense. I don't know where we really go from here. I mean, if you want a primer on the collapse of society, I would say being unable with modern language to describe self-defense, that's probably a pretty big indicator that our society is on the downswing right now and crumbling to dust. Self-defense is the bedrock of a society, because without it, you can't justify the society's existence, much less actually go about the process of preserving it. And we're seeing here right now, Kyle's unable to define, he's doing his best, but he's unable to bluntly define self-defense, aggression, and violence. And if he actually was able to do that, it would horrify the jury. It would absolutely horrify the jury, hands down, without a doubt. And that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate. Is that how I pronounce it? Primer? Yeah, primer is, you can pronounce it primer or primer. I believe primer, I believe they're both spelled the same way. I don't know if it's really the Oxford pronunciation is primer, but I've always interpreted it that a primer is like a device or paint that would, you know, like a detonator needs to be primed, or you're painting your house or something like that. You pronounce it primer. When you're talking about something in a literary or philosophical sense, you might say primer. That's maybe I also use Oxford commas, so you know. You guys probably stop listening to me. Okay, so back to Kyle. I just wanted to give that rant, I guess.
Are you correct?
Mr. Rosenbaum was chasing me. He said he was going to kill me if he got me alone. I was alone. I was running from him. I pointed at him, and it didn't stop him from continuing to chase me.
Did you hear my question?
Yes.
Yet you chose not to answer it.
Objection, Your Honor. He answered. He just didn't like the answer.
My question is, you understand that when you point your AR-15 at someone, it may make them feel like you're going to kill them, correct?
Calls for speculation. Relevant.
He asked if it would affect someone that way so as to perhaps deter the person.
Do you understand my question?
I do.
Can you please answer it?
I did. I said, Mr. Rosenbaum was chasing me. I pointed my gun at him, and that did not deter him. He could have ran away instead of trying to take my gun from me. But he kept chasing me. It didn't stop him.
Mr. Rittenhouse, you're telling us that you felt like you were about to die, right?
Yes.
But when you point the gun at someone else, that's going to make them feel like they're about to die, right? That's what you wanted him to feel.
No.
You wanted him to get the message from you that if you come any closer, I'm going to kill you. That's why you pointed the gun at him, right?
I pointed the gun at him to deter him from... I pointed the gun at him so he would stop chasing me. That's why I pointed the gun at him.
Because if you point the gun at him, you were hoping he would stop chasing you because he would get the message from you that if he keeps coming, you're going to kill him, right?
I didn't want to have to kill Mr. Rosenbaum.
That's not the question I asked.
Absolutely, it was the question he asked. He said, you wanted to kill Mr. Rosenbaum, and Kyle said, I didn't want to kill Mr. Rosenbaum. That's an answer. I don't know what Binger wants, but that's the answer. Yes, I know, as some people are saying in chat. Yeah, Kyle's being... He probably could have... This is where I think he lost it a little bit. Lost some of the perfect answers. These are the less perfect answers. These ones won't be saved in anybody's law library. But Kyle should have leaned into it. And I like I said, the reason why I talked earlier is that this is like our 6.5, almost 7 hours Kyle's been on the stand at this point. It was a long day for Kyle. It was a long day watching Kyle. I imagine Kyle probably slept as soon as he went home that night and just slept for like 12 hours. This was a very long day for Kyle, and this is at the end of a long day for Kyle. So yes, he probably could have... I think some of those answers he could have been more direct about. He could have owned it more on some of those answers. Taken in the instantaneous of that specific question and his specific non-answer. a little bit problematic, perhaps, taken in the context of his entire 7-8 hours worth of testimony. I don't think that it's particularly problematic. I don't think that it's going to be a make or break answer. I think it just is part of his whole testimony there. And I think the only thing it does, the worst that could do, is just go to his credibility. But the jury can see Binger badgering him. So either they're already by this point, by hour 6.5, they are either already predisposed to Kyle's story or they're not. And they either see that Mr. Binger is badgering him and causing him to stumble, or they don't. I don't know that Kyle's stumble here at this point makes a huge difference, and he certainly isn't confirming or denying any major points of the state's case there. But this is a spot where he probably could have worked out some rough edges, for sure.
Serving a legitimate purpose.
It seems argumentative, Mr. He said it serves no useful purpose, it's badgering. It does seem argumentative.
All right. So Kyle's got about another 40-ish minutes of testimony that day. As you can see, the judge just paused after an objection that this is badgering, this is argumentative, as we're seeing. The jury will probably take the previous few seconds of that, the previous few questions as well. That was what was objected to, so clearly Binger was in the wrong to ask those questions. Kyle's answers can't necessarily be relied upon during that moment. I guess we'll see. We're gonna pause here on this video, although I would not mind continuing to watch it for about another half hour with you guys. But basically the highlights for the rest of the day are Binger went through this asking over and over and over and over again, you intended to point a gun at him. And Kyle says, yes, to deter him. Yes, to deter him. Yes, to deter him. There was a segment earlier on where Binger said, other than the plastic bag, he didn't throw anything at you, did he? Which, as we'll remember from the video, Rosenbaum threw a plastic bag at Kyle. It was a plastic bag with stuff in it, not just a grocery bag. But I thought it was interesting the way Binger characterized that as, well, other than the thing he threw at you, he didn't throw anything at you, did he? Well, yeah, but he threw the thing at him. That's the thing that he threw. He did throw something. Let's see here. Binger tries to... He tries to characterize Kyle as standing over Rosenbaum's dead body. This is not in the videos. This has not been shown to have happened. Kyle was near Rosenbaum's body, but the way Binger phrased it made it sound like Kyle was right over top of him, standing over his dead body, looking down on him. That's not in evidence at all. Mr. Binger then goes on to recount Kyle's run down the road where he would end up meeting Dropkick Man, Anthony Hubert, and Gage Grosswicks. Mr. Binger asks Kyle, he goes, no one caused you to stumble and fall. You fell on your own, right? And Kyle says, well, somebody hit me. And Mr. Binger goes, yeah, but you just said that didn't cause you to fall. You said you fell because you were out of breath and you were lightheaded in your previous testimony. And Kyle said, yes, I was lightheaded because somebody hit me with a skateboard. That was ridiculous line of question. Also, again, what is with this victim blaming that somehow it's Kyle's fault? Like Kyle intentionally stumbled and fell so that he could get himself into a situation where you would have to have 3 attempts at self-defense shootings that in the road there. Again, I would imagine asking Mr. Binger asking this question of the 5-year-old that Rosenbaum raped. No one caused you to have Mr. Rosenbaum rape you, right? I mean, you kind of did that on your own, right? Like, Mr. Rosenbaum didn't cause you to get pinned down while Rosenbaum rapes you brutally, right? You did that on your own, right? I don't know. I would be very curious if the jury finds this compelling. I can't wait to hear what they have to say after the trial's over. At one point, Mr. Binger asks the question, quote, "Your only concern in that moment is your own safety, isn't it?" And Kyle says, yes. I mean, yes, I understand that people like Mr. Binger, the kind of people who would run on a Democrat ticket in the middle of the summer of love, I know that they would love to live in a collectivist society where every worker ant is just as invaluable as every other worker ant, and we only exist for the survival of the collective, not the individual. However, in this country, we do have individual rights still. Not that Mr. Binger would understand that. And so, yes, your own personal safety it is legal for you to consider your own personal safety of higher importance than anything else in your life. You are allowed to be safe. You are allowed to do things that keep yourself safe. Let's see here. Then Mr. Binger goes through a bizarre line of questioning about things that never happened, about, would Kyle have chased people down with his AR and shot them if he thought they were active shooters. And Mr. Binger was trying to equate, well, people were chasing you down because they thought that you were an active shooter, even though of all the people who would have known, Gage Grosswicks would have been the person to testify that he thought Kyle's an active shooter. And his explanation of that was not very compelling at all. So the state kind of missed their boat on that. So now they're trying to get Kyle to testify on their behalf that, well, if Kyle had thought someone else was an active shooter, that perhaps he would have chased them down and shot them. To which Kyle responds, I don't think I would have. And Mr. Binger tries to press on this, and they end up being an objection and stopping, and then we are done with questioning with Kyle. Kyle's defense lawyers say that they've got nothing further to add, and so they take a break and come back, at which point they decide that they are done for the day. There's some discussion about hopefully being able to be finished by Monday, which brings us to today, day 8. So day 8, we'll go through this rather quickly, but day 8 was very focused on Vidya stuff and what happens when you zoom in and pixels, and the word interpolation came up a lot. So the defense has a video expert that testified to the validity of the defense's digital video and image evidence. The state also had a expert, quote unquote, though maybe not after today. The state also had a image expert that testified to the quality of their digital images and digital videos. The defense calls in their expert witness on video analysis this morning. He gives some interesting and esoteric details about video forensics. It really got me going because I love code and programming and algorithms and all that stuff. However, its interest is largely outside the scope of the case. It will come back up later, but it's not really important to go into these specific details. There's an objection to going through this explanation. The state doesn't like it, so the jury is sent out. Let's see here. Binger doesn't like that the explanation includes sample videos that have file names like, quote, Rosenbaum's lunge.mp4 or strike defendant number 1.mp3. Like, there had these names of what was happening in the file, and Mr. Binger objected, saying that he did not like the file names being shown to the jury. So they have this break, and then they rename all the file names, and now Mr. Binger's happy. They return, the defense continuing to question their own expert witness. They review more video. They go through a excellent explanation that Kyle cannot see, that, like, when Kyle is there physically in the scene, when he was there in those moments, Kyle's eyes can't see in slow motion. The defense's video expert went through a very great explanation of this, which I think that Mr. Binger doesn't understand, that the human body can't see in slow motion. The human body can't see or focus on multiple things at the same time. The video expert did this wonderful focus experiment with the jury, where he told them to focus on a point between him and the jury, and then he held up his glasses and dropped them and said, "Did you see when my glasses dropped?" And I believe that they didn't answer because they can't really have that kind of interaction with the jury. But the point was surely made to them that they probably missed when something as small as glasses were dropped, when their focus was much further forward in the foreground than what the glasses were, because the glasses would have been severely out of focus if they were focusing in the correct spot. He explains that, the way the camera works is the range of focus is much wider. Your eyes, however, don't have that width of focus. I believe that has a more technical term, but I don't know what that is at the moment. I'm forgetting it. So the images, if you had a camera right next to your eye, you'd be able to see a lot more detail in the photo or the camera image than you would with your own eyes, because your eyes can only focus on certain depths of field. That's actually what it's called, depth of field. Your eyes have a much more limited depth of field than the camera does, which means that you can have a much narrower range of things that can be in focus at any given time. The camera on your phone or an actual digital video camera, the depth of field, the number of things that it can hold in focus at the same time is much, much greater than your eye. So Binger had been continuously going through the whole trial. Well, you guys in the jury, you can see all the stuff on camera, so clearly Kyle must have been able to see it. And the video expert explains, no. There's no evidence that Kyle was able to perceive that many things in that much focus, because that's not how the human eye works. Also, the human brain will, unlike a camera, omit certain portions of the image, especially if you're in a situation like Kyle was, where you've got a lot of adrenaline. You're going to get tunnel vision. You're going to get locked in to very specific things in your field of view, and your brain is going to just dump the rest of the image content. You're not actually going to be able to see stuff around you other than what you're directly looking at, because your brain's going to be in a high octane mode, a high adrenaline mode, and it just doesn't have the processing power to run all that extra image analysis. And so because it's only going to focus on the things that are important, like, perhaps Gage Grosswick's running up at you with a gun, it's going to ignore the other things that you're seeing, and from your perspective, you'll be blind to that. And actually, Kyle had testified earlier that he did have tunnel vision during this, that his vision was very, very narrow during the situation because of the adrenaline. That's not Kyle's fault, and that's not something Kyle's responsible for. That's called having a human body. The another fun thing that the video expert analysis also explained is that, the position of the camera is not where Kyle's eyes were. So when somebody is taking a video from several feet away, Kyle can't see what they're seeing. I don't know why he had to. I know why he had to explain this, because Mr. Binger doesn't understand this, and Mr. Binger's case has been largely centered around pointing out that, Kyle could have escaped here, and here, even though that location is clearly behind Kyle, and there's no evidence that Kyle saw those things. And so Binger's trying to explain that when Kyle was in the street and he ended up shooting Anthony and Gage and Jump Kick Man, that there's all these opportunities that Kyle could have had to not do that. And didn't he see this? And obviously he saw this, and this, because it's in the video, right? Well, the video is taken from a perspective that wasn't Kyle's. I thought I thought it was obvious stuff, but it was very interesting to hear it said out by an expert like that. And the explanation, as obvious as it is, the explanation for it was very good. And I believe that will be compelling to the jury when they think about what Binger said about certain images. the the defense sorry, let's see here. The state comes up for cross-examination and has the defense's video expert replay over and over again a video of Gage pointing a gun at Kyle. Now, there was some reasoning for this. However, I was only seeing that Mr. Binger asked for this video to be replayed like 10 times, and it was just so compelling and so high def of Gage pointing a gun at Kyle's head. I really was not paying attention to anything Binger was asking other than just, wow, I can't believe he's asking to replay this video over and over and over again for the jury. And I imagine the jury was probably doing similar to what I was doing. It was like, wow, that's pretty compelling evidence that Gage was pointing a gun at Kyle's head. What did Binger say? I don't know, but wow, he's playing it again. Okay. Let's see here. The defense then calls another expert in guns. I can't remember what exactly her name was or what she did, but basically she's just a gun expert. She's actually a rather attractive gun expert, if I do say so myself. She discusses the possible malfunction of Kyle's AR-15. It's been previously speculated, and I do have some information for you guys, because I promised you yesterday I would do an experiment with my AR-15, and I did do that for you. So I'll come back to you with the results here in a second. It was previously suggested that Kyle had attempted to shoot Gage while Gage's hands were up. So if you remember the video, after Kyle shoots twice at Jump Kick Man, Anthony Hubert runs up and tries to grab Kyle's rifle. Kyle shoots him in the chest, and then Gage Grosswick steps back and puts his hands in the air, and Kyle does something with his rifle, right? Something with his rifle, unknown what. Gage then takes the opportunity to lower his hands and run back at Kyle, at which point Kyle shoots him. There was some speculation by Gage and the defense that when Gage had his hands up, Kyle tried to shoot him, but there was a malfunction in his rifle preventing him from doing so, which is why you see Kyle do something fiddling with his rifle in some manner prior to Gage running up on him. What was speculated is that Kyle cleared a jam by pulling the recharge handle. Now, there was only 8 spent casings found over the course of the crime scene. Kyle's 30-round magazine had 22 rounds left in the magazine after this incident. So we have 8 shots on camera. We have 22 left in the magazine. That means that there must have been 30 rounds in the magazine. So if Kyle had cleared a jam, there's 2 possible things that could have happened. Perhaps after shooting Anthony, it's possible that the spent casing from that shot did not eject all the way, and it did what is called stovepiping, where it gets stuck in the ejector and your rifle's now no longer able to fire until you clear that. But if you recharged it, it's possible that this stuck casing would have prevented the magazine from chambering another round. So if you pulled your recharge and cleared that jam, it's possible that only the previously spent casing would have popped out and not a live round. Now, it's also equally possible with certain malfunctions and also stovepiping that if you pull that recharge handle, you're actually going to not only eject the previously spent casing, but you're also going to eject a unfired round, a live round of ammunition out of your magazine, right? So there's 2 possible ways that could have happened if it is true that Kyle recharged his rifle. Spoiler alert, he did not recharge his rifle. We've got testimony to that now, and I'll get into that in a second. Yesterday, when this was being discussed, we weren't sure because we didn't have an expert witness. And it was my contention that, 1, there was no unspent round found. There was no 9th bullet found on the crime scene that was attributed to Kyle. So if there had been, that would be okay. Maybe he did recharge his rifle. That would have been strong evidence that he had. But because there was only 8 empty casings, and we know that those came from the 8 shots on camera, then there must have either it was a stovepipe malfunction that resulted in no live ammunition being ejected, only the previously spent casing. Or if he did eject a spent case or the spent casing and a live round of ammunition, that must have been lost. However, if there was a live round of ammunition that was lost, that would have meant that Kyle's rifle had at one point 31 rounds of ammunition in it. And it was my question as to whether or not that was possible by leaving a round loaded in the chamber of an AR-15 and then refilling your magazine from 29 up to 30 rounds and then putting it back into the rifle. I actually did an experiment last night where I did that with my rifle. I charged it. I left one in the chamber. I pulled the magazine out. I loaded another round of ammunition into it. I put the magazine back into the rifle, and I wasn't at a range, so I didn't shoot it. I would imagine that it was fireable. I did not actually get the opportunity to fire it, but it is actually possible to have a AR-15 that is loaded with 30 rounds of ammunition. There we go. I guess that makes sense. I guess it's just something I'd never thought of or tried before, but I did try it, and it is indeed possible. However, it's entirely irrelevant because this gun expert was actually the person who investigated or reviewed the spent casings after they were brought in as evidence. And it was her testimony that there was 8 casings spent and there was 22 left in the magazine. And, well, presumably there was 21 left in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. However, she testified that there was no unspent ammunition found. There was no 31st bullet found at the crime scene at all. It is also likely that if one of those spent casings had been stovepiped, meaning it got jammed in the ejector, there would be evidence on the casing. The casing would be bent in some way. If you have any familiarity with shooting, you know that when you get a stovepipe, you got a real bent up casing, especially if it gets real jammed in there, right? But even if it just gets a little bit jammed in there, it's going to have a little bit of tool marking on it from touching the metal of your rifle. And she did not, I don't think that she was asked about that, but she didn't testify or volunteer any information. And I think that would have been an important line of questioning. I should be a lawyer. Is there any evidence that any of these casings were involved in some kind of malfunction that left tool marking on the casing? We don't know that, but it appears no, and it appears that the defense was successful in getting this gun expert to explain to the jury that Kyle did not recharge his rifle. He did not clear a malfunction. That when Gage tried to say that Kyle tried to shoot him, but Kyle's rifle malfunctioned, that wasn't true. The defense was successful in getting this witness to explain that was not a true thing that happened, that Kyle could not have pulled the trigger on Gage when Gage's hands were up. She had a poignant quote that if the rifle's not malfunctioning and you pull the trigger, you get a bang. If the rifle is malfunctioning and you pull the trigger, you get a click. So she says that it's not possible for Kyle to have pulled the trigger with a non-malfunctioning rifle and have it not fire a bullet. So if Kyle pulled the trigger when he was pointing at Gage, then he would have fired at Gage when Gage's hands were in the air, but that never happened. She also testified to the fact that if you're pulling the recharge handle to clear a malfunction, she showed, and one of the defense lawyers actually got out Kyle's rifle again and pointed it at people, and showed how much arm movement is required to pull the specific recharge handle on Kyle's rifle all the way back. She explained that if you don't pull the recharge handle all the way back, you're not going to clear that malfunction. And then we were able to see a demonstration of just how much arm movement is required to actually get that recharge handle all the way back. And that is not in the video. In the video, Kyle's arm does not go anywhere near the distance required to pull that recharge handle all the way back. You would have seen a rather aggressive movement of his elbow going backwards and his hand coming, from where his rifle is all the way back. And you just don't see that. You would have seen this kind of like lawnmower starting motion, and you don't see that in the video. So if Kyle shot at Gage and nothing came out, that would have been 1 in a quadrillion. It's also actually possible to see, and it would have been possible to see in evidence if there was what's called a light primer strike on one of the casings. That was perhaps one of the casings was tapped twice with the firing pin, and the first time didn't actually trigger the explosion that gets the bullet out the chamber. That was not asked. However, it was, again, not testified to. It wasn't. It's really wild that me just here, I guess, in my room talking to you guys, I have so many more ideas about what they could have done to analyze this rifle and to analyze these casings than what they actually did. And it's a little bit pathetic, but a little bit pathetic on their part, at least. However, there was no testimony that there was anything resembling a light primer strike. So there's no evidence that there was a bullet in the chamber that was hit with the firing pin because Kyle pulled the trigger and then nothing happened. Also, if there was a malfunction of that nature, that would have unset the trigger. If let's say you put a dummy bullet into your AR-15 and you pull the trigger, the firing pin's going to hit that dummy bullet and nothing's going to happen. The explosion of the bullet, of the casing, of the gunpowder rather, that is actually what gets the AR-15 to automatically recharge itself and load the next round. If you pull the trigger and nothing happens in the bullet because the primer goes bad or something, then you can't just pull the trigger and try again. You have to actually go through that previously described motion of recharging, doing the lawnmower type motion with the recharge handle to reset the trigger, because the trigger will become unset, and without the explosion of the bullet, there's nothing to set the trigger back. So there is 8 different reasons that Kyle did not actually pull the trigger at Gage when Gage has his hands up. I think that was conveyed. I think it could have been explained better. I also think I'm choking. Alrighty. Are you guys harassing each other in chat? Okay, so then we call, the defense calls Drew Hernandez, who was fantastic. Drew Hernandez is another one of the live streamers that was on the ground that day. He had been documenting the riots all summer, the whole summer of 2020. He very bluntly calls the people gathered rioters, Antifa, and BLM. It was fantastic. It was accurate. He testifies that he was up at the courthouse when the police made the decision to push the rioters down towards the car source, down towards where Kyle's people were. This is something that has been brought up over and over and over again, that there was at some point during the night, there was a decision by the police to push violent Antifa rioters and arsonists away from the courthouse and push them down towards the business district where they knew civilians like Kyle and his group were defending businesses. It was previously testified that one of the police officers actually stopped by and talked to members of Kyle's group and said, hey, in about a half hour, we're going to push him down to you guys to deal with. A police officer told a group of civilians, we're going to push armed, angry rioters to you guys, and you civilians deal with them. We've had that corroborated over and over and over again, and we had it corroborated again today, that the police at a certain point in the night, the police decided not only had they abandoned the city to that they had abandoned the city to anarchy, that they were actually going to concentrate the anarchy on Kyle's group and make these civilians have to deal with it. Let's see here. When Mr. Hernandez sees the rioters getting pushed down the street, inevitably towards Kyle, Mr. Hernandez says that he witnesses and has videos of the rioters breaking up concrete on the sidewalks to pick up chunks and throw it at people, and that's been testified many times throughout this trial. It's been seen in many videos. Mr. Hernandez testifies that he saw rioters agitate Kyle's group at car source. They specifically were the ones initiating conflict at the car source where Kyle's group was. We've seen videos of this. He testifies that the first time he saw Kyle Rittenhouse that night, Kyle attempted to de-escalate a conflict outside the car source. So this is Hernandez saying you wanna prance around, Mr. Binger, that Kyle was the one causing all this trouble, that he shouldn't have been there. Hernandez's testimony is that he saw Kyle. The only thing that he saw Kyle doing was de-escalating conflict. Hernandez testifies that he sees Rosenbaum, quote, push a flaming dumpster into police cars with humans inside of it. That was lovely how blunt that was, and fantastic that he said it like that. He then testifies that he sees Kyle put out this flaming dumpster fire, and that he sees how agitated this made Mr. Rosenbaum. Again, the defense attorneys are examining him right now, and he's a defense witness, so it's not an adversarial relationship, or he's not argumentative. But Kyle's defense lawyer says, you say you saw Mr. Rosenbaum get agitated from this. How do you know he was agitated? And Hernandez says, well, Mr. Rosenbaum said, why did you do that? I would say that, and obviously looking very angry, I would say that's Mr. Rosenbaum did a pretty good job of narrating his feelings that night. If only, I would say that him yelling, fuck you, a half second before he grabs at Kyle's rifle, I would say that was enough of Rosenbaum declaring intent to harm Kyle. Certainly, I would say fuck you is not what you would say to somebody that you're going to give a hug to. I don't know, maybe unless you're besties or you're Canadian or something. But Rosenbaum did a great job of narrating his feelings that night. And again, Kyle puts out the fire. Rosenbaum says, why did you do that? Well, it's a fire. Let's see here. Drew Hernandez testifies that he sees Rosenbaum being the one leading the group to the gas station. Now, we've seen, I believe it's called Ultimate Gas. There is a lot of video of a gas station that night. I would be so surprised if you don't know which gas station I'm talking about. That is like the definitive gas station that night. And Rosenbaum, that's the place where Rosenbaum yelled, shoot me N-word, shoot me N-word. I'm sure you've seen that video. Drew Hernandez testified that he saw Rosenbaum leading the charge to that gas station, and that Mr. Rosenbaum was clearly trying to start conflict when he was at the gas station. Hernandez jumps forward a little bit in time and says that he was there and saw Rosenbaum chase Kyle. Drew says that he sees the initial firearm go off, which is the pistol that Mr. Zeminski would have. Again, we talked about that yesterday a little bit. Zeminski's, so Hernandez says he sees Zeminski shoot the firearm into the air. He's testified that he, quote, saw and heard this in real time, meaning that he was physically present when this happened, and it wasn't just seeing it through a camera. He saw it with his own eyes when it happened. He says that he testifies, Drew Hernandez testified that he sees Rosenbaum lunge at Kyle. He was asked, did he see Kyle escalating or provoking the group at any point during the night? He testifies, no, he did not. Cross-examination, Mr. Binger, hot at the gate here, explains that Mr. Hernandez is an out-of-towner, asking him where he's from and all this stuff. Again, all of the people Binger is representing are out-of-towners, so I don't know what the big deal is. Binger makes issue with Hernandez characterizing the rioters as, quote, Antifa and BLM, to which Drew says, well, they are. I mean, that's what they are. Binger accuses Hernandez of, quote, making videos. And Hernandez says, no, I don't make videos. I document events. I record video. I don't make video, which is funny. If you want some fun testimony, Hernandez's testimony was fun given how blunt he was. Let's see here. Binger doesn't understand what websites are. He kept asking Hernandez various questions about Hernandez's website. Drew Hernandez has a website that's, I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but it's a website with a URL with his name in it, like something like drewhernandeznews.com or something to that effect. And Binger asks him a bunch of really stupid questions about this website. Like, is it a business website? I don't even remember what all he was asking about it, but there's a bunch of just questions that if somebody asked you these questions about any website, they just don't make sense. Like they seem out of context. Mr. Hernandez says that he's a professional commentator, as opposed to me, who's an amateur commentator. Binger doesn't understand what commentators do or is. Hernandez did a great job at making Binger look like an idiot. Not that that's very hard. Binger was trying to imply through a certain line of questioning about Hernandez's employer that Hernandez is now attached to what is thought to be a libertarian or right-leaning new media website, a digital media website. So Binger was trying to bring this up, asking about, what political bias does his employer have? And the judge puts a halt to that, saying that, quote, political bias does not affect judgment of evidence. Again, politics is not on trial, which the judge actually also said that politics is not on trial. Then we have this fun little clip here, which I'll play.
Your videos that you have captured of these incidents that you call riots, they're very slanted against the people who are rioting. You characterize them as Antifa, Black Lives Matter rioters, correct?
Because they are rioting in the footage, yes, absolutely.
Wow. I mean, kind of like how we saw that all summer of 2020. And what did CNN say? Standing in front of a burning building, fiery but mostly peaceful. Who was slanting the video evidence all summer? It certainly wasn't people like Drew Hernandez. But this Mr. Binger is, at this point, is defending the entire mainstream media establishment's coverage of the 2020 riots, saying that, well, Hernandez's footage is biased. It's got a slant to it against the rioters because he's characterizing them as rioters. And Hernandez says, well, because they're rioting in the footage. Use your goddamn eyes. And as is kind of a analogy for this entire case, all of the footage that shows people chasing and intending to do Kyle harm, the video shows it. It's just, you don't have to characterize the video. The video just is what it is. It just shows what it shows. It shows Rosenbaum chasing Kyle. It shows Gage trying to get the jump on him. It shows Jump Kick Man putting his boot on Kyle's face. Also previously, I kind of glossed it. Again, the spot after we stopped watching Kyle's testimony from yesterday, there was like another 40 minutes of it. I would love to watch all of it. Just you guys can go watch all of it on your own. I just thought I'd play the most interesting 10 minutes out of 7 hours. But there's also another point where from yesterday where Binger talks about Jump Kick Man and that Kyle shot twice at Jump Kick Man. And Binger says, well, Jump Kick Man didn't have any weapons. And Kyle says, yes, but his boot was actually on his face. The Jump Kick Man's boot was on Kyle's face. Kyle testified that he can feel the tread on his face when Jump Kick Man tries to curb stomp him. And Binger says, well, other than that, he wasn't armed. And after he wasn't stepping on you, like, why did you shoot at him? And it was just totally ridiculous line of questioning. As I've said before, the testimonies I would recommend watching would be certainly Gage's. Absolutely watch all of Kyle's testimony. And then for funsies, I would watch a little bit of Hernandez's testimony here. But if you wanted to kind of capture the case, I would say that watch all of Kyle's testimony. It is so rare that the defendant in a murder trial testifies, and especially with the gravity of this particular case, the implications both politically, constitutionally, the right of an individual to self-defense, Second Amendment things. There's so many things that this case gets into. The rarity of the types of things that have happened during this case, especially the rarity of the way Prosecutor Binger was acting during Kyle's testimony, I would say if you have the time, Kyle's testimony in full is the one to watch, front to back, the whole thing. All right. Then after this little video here, Binger asks Hernandez why Hernandez decided to get a lawyer, which is totally out of bounds. The judge stops the question, sends the jury out. This is totally out of bounds. Yesterday, Binger was trying to ask Kyle about why did he want to take his Fifth Amendment right, essentially questioning his right to the Fifth Amendment. Everybody has the right to the Fifth Amendment. And now Binger's questioning Hernandez on his right to seek counsel, to seek legal counsel. You cannot do that. That is not allowed. You do not require any justification for having a lawyer. You do not have to justify why you're being quiet. You don't have to justify your use of the Fifth Amendment. You don't have to justify your ability to seek counsel. You don't have to justify why you've got a lawyer for something. You don't have to justify that, especially not in a court of goddamn law. Jesus Christ, Binger. So judge sends the jury out. They have a discussion about this. The jury comes back in, and Binger pushes on Hernandez, asking if he posted tweets in support of, or if he posted his videos. Hernandez submitted something like 50 videos to the evidence. Not all of them were taken into evidence, but many of them were. But because these are videos that Hernandez was in many cities all summer long in 2020 capturing the riot. The Kenosha was one of dozens that he was at. And every time, the reason why he was on the ground was to gather footage, which was much needed footage, because if you'll remember back to 2020, people like Hernandez, that footage really helped the rest of us understand what was going on in these cities, because certainly the mainstream media, fiery but mostly peaceful, that was not giving us a view of what was going on. People like Hernandez were. So it was very important that they were out there on the street, out there getting video and posting that video. Hernandez was regularly posting videos to Twitter and to his website and to YouTube at the time that it was happening. He posted the video of his vantage point of the parking lot where Kyle shot Rosenbaum at. That was posted to Hernandez's Twitter about 20 minutes after it happened. It was very rapid. And he was doing that with many clips all summer long, very rapidly reposting them. So there's several videos in Kenosha, obviously, that he took that night that were posted to various social media. And Binger asks him, you posted those videos to help out Kyle, didn't you? And Hernandez says he didn't know who Kyle was at the time, so there's no way for him to have done intent with Kyle one way or the other. And also, it was completely in line with him posting other videos all the other times that he posted videos, and there was really no reason for him to not do it. But Binger's trying to create this, again, I don't think very compelling narrative, but Binger's attempting to set up this case that Hernandez is best buddies with Kyle. He actually does suggest this at one point, that Hernandez referring to Kyle by Kyle's first name, that perhaps they're friends, perhaps they knew each other from beforehand. This doesn't go anywhere because it's just not true. But Binger has this very flimsy case that, Hernandez is, he's only recording these videos to help Kyle, which once again, how would Hernandez know in the moment that he was going to be helping this person that he had no idea who they were? He was just taking videos of things that were happening that night. He didn't know what the results of that were going to be. Totally ridiculous to ask that question. Then Binger says, you were posting disparaging remarks about Joseph Rosenbaum on Twitter, weren't you? And Hernandez says, can you be more specific? And Binger says, well, in general you were. And Hernandez says, no, I need you to read me the specific one that I did. I post a lot of things on Twitter every day. If you have something specific, please read it out to me. And then Binger did not do that, which I think probably because Binger didn't have anything, or if he did, Binger didn't feel like reading it out, because probably I would imagine that it possibly had something to do with Rosenbaum's previous convictions, and that if Binger had read that out, that would have opened the door for Kyle's defense to speak more about those previous convictions. And so this was actually an interesting trap that Binger set for himself and then walked into. Binger just laying down rakes and just walking into them all over the place here. And so that line of questioning ended up going nowhere, but I believe that would have been highly fascinating. if it turned out, now I don't know what exactly these tweets were, and I don't even know if they exist, but this is my assumption as to why did Binger not read the tweets out. The only reason I can think of him not reading these tweets out is because they have some information about Rosenbaum or some speculation about Rosenbaum that was previously not allowed into the trial. So as we know, it's not been brought up that Rosenbaum raped a bunch of small children because that was not allowed in as evidence. It also wasn't allowed in as evidence that Anthony Hubert held knives to the throats of his brother, to the throat of his brother, while he forced his grandma to clean his house, and threatening to kill his brother if his grandma didn't clean his house. That was not allowed to be brought into trial, though that was discussed while the jury was outside the room, which is why I know that detail. And it also wasn't allowed to be brought into the trial that Gage, the reason why Gage had a expired CCW is not because he went past the expiry date. Gage's CCW was actually revoked because he committed armed robbery with the same Glock that he tried to point at Kyle's head. And that's why he didn't have a CCW at the time. So there's a bunch of this stuff that went on in these people's past that wasn't allowed to be admitted as evidence. So that's the only reason why I can think of that Binger wouldn't read out the tweet, but I don't know. Maybe he just also didn't have it and was just trying to get Hernandez to say something that wasn't true. The defense cross-examines, the defense returns to a direct examination and asks Hernandez again to clarify, you didn't really post the videos to help Kyle, did you? Hernandez says, no, I didn't know who Kyle was at the time. The defense asks Hernandez, well, what was the purpose of you posting the videos online? And he responds, I'm a journalist. That's perfectly valid. Binger says what may well be the quote of the trial. Injecting your opinion is not what journalists do. Binger said injecting your opinion is not what journalists do, because Hernandez had previously testified that he's also a professional commentator and a journalist. And so Binger was trying to tease apart, well, you can't be a commentator and a journalist because journalists don't inject their opinion into their source material, do they? I'm going to let that one sit because I think I could probably do another 3 hours on just that sentence. So we'll let that one hang. I'm sure you guys understand I'm sure you understand why that's an interesting thing to say. Alrighty. At that point, they take a break, and then they talk to the defense's video guy again that they had talked to at the beginning of the day. Just again, more general information about how algorithms work with the interpolation, which I'll probably talk about here in a second. They take another break. The defense says that they're probably going to rest after they have one more person testify for the state prosecutors, and the defense says they're probably going to rest afterwards, which means the trial will be over, and they will send the trial to deliberation with the jury. The prosecution estimates that they have about 5 minutes worth of questions for one more witness. Both sides decide they will wait. I believe that they said something about waiting until Monday, though I think that they might mean tomorrow. So what I think is going to happen is I think that tomorrow they're going to go through a slight bit more testimony. Then they are going to be giving jury instruction, and then they will either send the jury out on Friday for deliberation. They've discussed maybe doing it on Saturday, and they've discussed maybe doing it on Monday, though I believe it's the goal to send the jury to deliberation tomorrow. That's the goal. I guess we'll see if that happens. Both sides said that they would actually prefer waiting until Monday to send the jury out to deliberation, just to give them the week rather than getting them butted up against the weekend. However, the judge said he would prefer to do it on Friday if possible. The defense brings in their video guy to testify against the state brings in their video guy to testify against the state's video guy. So the state's video guy, like I said, did a very good explanation of how is it that cameras work versus the human eye, what is the differences in what the human eye can perceive of a given event versus what a camera can, explaining that, here in the courtroom, we can slow the video down way down. We can zoom in. We can enhance, whatever. You can't do that when you're a human on the ground with your eyes. You can't slow the video down. You can't zoom in and enhance. You can't see things from several different vantage points, as we've had the luxury of doing in this case, where every angle was covered by dozens of cameras. So there is an image that the defense would like, or that the state prosecutors would like to bring into evidence. This image allegedly shows Kyle pointing a rifle at somebody prior to Rosenbaum chasing him. Now, I previously stated that even if this is true, I don't think it matters. I think that it's easily debunkable that it doesn't matter even if it's true. However, there is a question as to whether or not it's true. The image is, which I think I might be able to find it here. Let me look around here for a second. Basically, this image is very, very small part of a video that's been ridiculously zoomed in on. And it's the state's, or it's Kyle's defense position that this image has been altered in some way, that the zooming and enhancing process has edited the video in some way that is not a true representation of what the image was. Which actually, I'm going to put this image up on screen here. So the image on the left here is what the state is attempting to admit to evidence. This image has been zoomed and enhanced at a ridiculous degree. The defense lawyers, they had their video expert give some explanation as to what does a computer do when it's zooming in on an image. So you're not actually expanding the pixels in your monitor, right? They're physical objects. They're staying the same size. So if you're zooming in on an image, well, there must be additional information being added in to that image so that it now recovers the same area. If you take a portion of an image, like let's look back at Binger's face here. So the spot that I've got on Binger's face zoomed and enhanced here, you can see that, maybe we're looking at something that's like maybe 30 pixels by 30 pixels, right? And I've zoomed that in, so now it covers 300 by 300 pixels. Well, 30 by 30 to 300 by 300, that's a lot of extra pixels in the 300 version. Where did the extra pixels come from? It makes a difference where those extra pixels come from, because those pixels, they have to have color and brightness and contrast. Where does it get the information? Where does the computer get the information when it's zooming in and adding more pixels? That makes a huge difference. And as was explained during this part of the trial here, Kyle's defense lawyer says it makes a big difference when you're pinch zooming on a family photo or a photo of your dog. It's fine. It doesn't really matter where those extra pixels come from. If you're going to look at an image like this, like what I've got up on the screen on the left here, and you're going to either go to jail for the rest of your life or not, all of a sudden, it makes a really big fucking difference where those extra pixels came from. It makes a huge goddamn difference where those pixels came from. And so the state wants to put this image in. The state calls in their quote-unquote forensic expert image analyst to explain where the extra pixels come from. Now, as you guys know or may know, I am a programmer. I deal a lot with algorithms, advanced mathematics, statistics, which obviously I deal with statistics so much I forgot what the name was. Statistics, calculus, math, advanced, all that stuff. Algorithms are my forte. Programming, all that stuff. I have actually written what are called pixel shaders before. Pixel shaders are things that will, as it kind of sounds, they will contrast certain pixels, right? So I've done image analysis algorithms before that I've written myself. So I have a little bit of familiarity with what's going on here. There's several different methods that a computer can use, several different algorithms that a computer can use when you zoom in on something to change that 30 by 30 pixel arrangement into a 300 by 300 pixel arrangement. There's a lot of different ways that it can add those extra pixels in. And like I said, If it's in a murder trial, it makes a big difference. If it's your dog, it doesn't really make a big difference at all. The methods used, one of them copies the existing pixels at their current color and fills in the gaps. Another algorithm uses the average color between two pixels to generate new pixels with new colors that weren't in the original image. So let's say in that 30 by 30 arrangement, I've got the center two pixels, one of them's red and one of them's blue, right? When I expand that out to 300 by 300, that red pixel and that blue pixel are now going to be 30 pixels away from each other. What color are the 30 pixels between them? Makes a difference. It makes a big difference. If we're using one algorithm that's just making 15 red pixels and 15 blue pixels, well, now we've got the same colors. Maybe the fineness or the smoothness of the image has gone down, but we've now got accurate color representation. However, if I use something that blends the colors together, now those 30 pixels are a gradient from red to blue. Some of them are purple, some of them are indigo, some of them are deep red. They're a continuum of color between them. So now we don't have color accuracy. We may have retained shape accuracy, but we don't have color accuracy. So when you're zooming in on something, you have several trade-offs, and there's several different algorithms that balance the trade-offs differently. But you essentially have a trade-off between maintaining shape accuracy and maintaining color accuracy. However, if you're doing something like expanding from 30 pixels wide to 300 pixels wide, let's go a little crazier. Let's say I went from 30 pixels wide to 3,000 pixels wide, which is approximately what's going on with this image that's on screen right now, where they've zoomed in to such a ridiculous degree that the percent of information on the screen right now that was in the original source image represents a 1% or less fraction of the information now presented on screen. 99% of this image is interpolation by the zoom algorithm. If 99% of the image is just the computer guessing what color and shape should be there, it makes a really big goddamn difference what algorithm is guessing 99% of this made-up image that's now being used to put you in jail. It makes a big goddamn difference. And what was the most incredible thing there was a lot of incredible things I've seen in this trial, so I don't want to overblow it. This was the top 5 most incredible things I've seen during the Rittenhouse trial. The state prosecutor, they called their expert image analyst, who is the state of Wisconsin's forensic image analyst. And this guy could not explain how the zoom algorithm works. I just explained to you way better than he did how the zoom algorithm works. What I just told you is all stuff that I knew yesterday prior to this case. That's all stuff that I was aware of prior to this case happening. And I told you that my specialty is not image forensics. I do have some experience in writing image algorithms, but that's not my specialty. And this guy, he must have had, for him to get that position, he must have just gotten like a 3-week online course certification in image analyst and doesn't actually know anything. But he wasn't able to explain where those extra pixels are coming from. He couldn't explain. He was the one who zoomed in on this image. He was the one who processed the image to zoom in on it. And he couldn't explain if the algorithm he used the one where it was copying the colors, or he couldn't explain if it was inventing new colors that were on a continuum between the pixels. Because let's go back to that analysis I had where you've got the 30 by 30 pixel image. Maybe it's cyberpunk or a CryptoPunk. Yeah, the CryptoPunks are about 30 by 30, right? They're bitmaps. Well, let's say that one of the pixels is red and one of the pixels is blue. and you zoom in from that 30 by 30 and you translate it into a 300 by 300, right? Now there's 30 pixels between the red and the blue. Well, let's say that you zoomed it into 3000. You've expanded that image from 30 by 30 to 3000 by 3000. Now you've got 300 new pixels between your original red pixel and your original blue pixel. That's a lot of fucking pixels for the computer to just invent out of thin air. Now, again, and Binger tried to do this, and I think he may have been nearly successful. Hopefully my explanation is swaying you somewhat, because everybody today was like, it's 2021, everyone has smartphones, everybody's familiar with pinch zoom, everybody's familiar with, you hold control and move your mouse wheel and you zoom in on an image. Everyone's familiar with zooming in on an image. What the defense said makes sense, though. If you're zooming in on a family photo, if you're zooming in on a CryptoPunk, if you're zooming in on your dog's nose, it doesn't matter where those pixels come from. If you are life and death going to jail for the rest of your life for 2 counts of murder, 2 more counts of attempted murder, it makes a big goddamn difference where those 300 extra pixels come from. It makes a really big difference if the state is going to submit into evidence an image where over 99% of the pixels are interpolated pixels, that they're colors and shapes that the computer made up with an algorithm. Now, maybe, and there certainly are, it's certainly reasonable that some of these zoom algorithms would maintain the true image to the best of their ability, or at least a true approximation of the image. And certainly a competent image analyst, like myself perhaps, could have testified to that. However, the state's analyst was not able to testify to that. He in fact testified that he did not know how the zoom algorithm worked. He did not know whether or not the algorithm he used color interpolation, where it would make up new colors, or if it would copy colors from existing pixels. He didn't know. He couldn't answer that. He couldn't give you the explanation I just gave you. He couldn't give you the explanation of what he did. He didn't know. What he did is the same thing you or I could do, which is he took an image and he pinch zoomed it over and over and over again. And he doesn't know what the pinch zoom algorithm was doing. He's claiming, and the state is claiming, that he is an accredited, certified forensic image analyst. I posit to you that he is not. And I think it was made very clear to the jury, or at least I hope it was, that he doesn't know what he's talking about. I believe what I'm looking at here, because what I just explained, that I literally paused starting the stream at exactly 5 p.m. Eastern because I was finishing watching the testimony that I just explained. I did actually get through the entirety of today's stuff. And so that little back and forth with the quote unquote forensic image analyst, that happened like up into like the second before I went live today. So you guys are about as up to date as I am. However, it appears Twitter's a little bit ahead of me. Let's see here. So I believe that this tweet is attempting to show on the left here the state's image versus the image that was captured from the video uploaded to Twitter and to YouTube. And I believe it shows that there's some differences. I think I'll hold off on that, and I will possibly we'll see if this is important. Like I said, I don't, even if this image is true, I don't think that it matters. I don't think that it matters at all. However, every little bit counts. And if every little bit is that you're going to be interpolating 3,000 pixels between every real pixel, and again, as I'm sure you guys are aware, images are two-dimensional things, right? So I'm just talking about the 3,000 pixels between 2 original pixels on just that line. And you know that if there's 3,000 pixels, or there's 300 pixels being interpolated on just a line, well, you really got to interpolate that whole square, with the 4 corners of that square being the 4 original pixels. You've now got a square of 300 by 300. Somebody in chat, if I do math on stream, will be awful. I'm going to guess 9 9,000? 90,000. My guess is 300 times 300 is 90,000. I bet you I'm wrong. But essentially, you're going to have 4 real pixels and 90,000 made up pixels if you're zooming in that much. We don't even know how much they zoomed in on this, but that's a hell of a ratio of made up interpolated information. Again, that's not to say that the interpolation's bad or the guess is bad. However, the state was unable to make their case that the interpolation was good. They just want you to think, oh, well, I zoom in on my dog's nose all the time, so that's good enough to send Kyle to jail. It's not. It's not. Alrighty. Well, that was today's stream. I thank you very much for joining me. Like I said, I did get through the entirety of today's hearing. There will be, I don't know what they're going to do tomorrow. Like I said, they think that they will be resting their case tomorrow. The defense, or no, sorry, the state would like to bring in one more person. And then after that, the defense said that they'll probably rest, depending on what's discussed. And at that point, they will probably give instructions to the jury and probably send the jury off to deliberate. It's possible. It is possible that tomorrow evening there's a verdict. If the jury comes back real quick, it's possible that tomorrow night there's a verdict. It's possible within the next 24 hours there's a verdict. It's also possible that the verdict doesn't come until Monday or Tuesday or 3 weeks from now. That's possible too. I think, I don't know if a quick verdict or a long verdict. I don't know which way that would mean for this case. It is, I don't know what's going to happen. I guess we'll find out tomorrow and this week. Again, thank you so much for joining me. Much appreciated with you guys following me through on this crazy ride. I think I've put something like 80 hours into this series here, between the streaming and the watching the trial and all of that stuff. And I much appreciate you guys following me on that ride. I will be happy and relieved when this is over, just so I can get to rest a little bit. And I will be even more relieved and celebrating if the verdict is in our favor. All right, guys. Well, this has been the Rittenhouse Day 8 trial update. I will hopefully see you guys tomorrow. Everybody have a good night. Trevize signing off. See you guys.